It's officially spooky season, and you know what that means. It's time for some Simpsons Treehouse of Horror goodness. Or should I say, badness. Because there is nothing truly more scary than a bad Treehouse of Horror segment. I've already counted down the best of the classic era and the best of the modern era. I'm all about that positivity. But you know, I've been way too nice to the show lately. It's time to tear him a new asshole. These are the worst of the worst, the Treehouse segments that make us yawn, roll our eyes, and write angry forum posts. These are the top 20 worst Treehouse of Horror segments. Intrusion of the Potty Switchers is a fairly decent little body snatchers parody that is unfortunately attached to a horrible framing device. As a general mayhem in Springfield story, I think it does its job competently enough. We bounce around from location to location, watching in horror as people get absorbed. They give us protagonists in Bart and Lisa to follow along with, get that sense of peril as they escape with Officer Lou. We even get an awesomely surreal fantasy sequence as Lisa succumbs to the plants. All that stuff is solid enough. I just hate the Maple and Steve Mobs angle, that a fun concept got attached to one of The Simpsons' most doggedly brain-dead jokes. The pun continues being terrible, and it's not even integrated that well into the parody. Get it? They're pod people. The conclusion is a letdown too, another surprise utopia for Springfield to be stuck in. I like this ending better when they were sucked into a black hole. In conclusion, their jokes about the Zune are better than their jokes about Apple. The end. Freaks No Geeks is somehow one of the less offensive entries on this list, as it has some solid jokes and uses its secondary cast well, at least by the lower standards of this list. Plus, it probably introduced a lot of people to the original 1932 film Freaks, as they throw in plenty of direct references to it. But I don't think it really works with Moe as the protagonist as is. It's a funny gag that Moe is so ugly normally that he can be part of the circus freak show. It's a very common sort of Moe joke, and it works here for his introduction. But it doesn't play in the context of the parody they're going for. It ends up coming off as a generic Moe, Marge, Homer love triangle set in a circus. They accidentally diluted the parody by going for this Moe joke. There's no sizzle to it, just a bland murder scheme over an emerald ring. They don't even treat us to an on-screen Mr. Burns death. I could see how others would really enjoy this segment, especially classic cinema fans. Maybe it's just the sepia tone clouding my judgment, but for me, it's too dry for its own good. Gotta say, Geriatric Park has an absolutely dynamite premise, using Springfield's dinosaurs as literal dinosaurs. If you're gonna put a Simpsons spin on a Jurassic Park parody, this is a pretty darn clever way to go about it. However, the execution is sleepy and formulaic. I like in theory that they're subverting the grandeur of Jurassic Park by showing the old folks bumming around like normal. At the same time, I came here for frickin' dinosaurs, and by the time we reach that point, they don't have enough time to have any fun with it. They have to rush through a bunch of random dinosaur attacks and go straight to the Lisa Grandpa showdown. There's no pacing to the mayhem, just bam 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 bam, we're done. There's a part of me that wonders if they should have just made the old folks dinosaurs to begin with, surprising the families up front. Geriatric Park does feature some funny designs and doesn't have too many stinkers from a joke's perspective. It just doesn't live up to its potential. It's a classic case of all setup, little payoff. First off, absolutely love the Mad Men parody. It's awesome. They get the visuals and atmosphere of that series perfect. 10 out of 10, no notes. In fact, the whole first half of this thing is passable, poking fun at Disney's prior run-ins with daycares, and then finding a creative reason for Homer to go around murdering. They just totally lose me in the second half with Krusty and the celebrities in heaven. It essentially becomes an episode of The Critic, where we hop around from one caricature to the next. Few of these jokes land, it's just one long series of disposable celebrity jokes, nothing especially clever about any of them. The big showdown doesn't even have a sense of action. It's just deliver your joke and then shooty. And then, because they seemingly don't know what to do, they just double back to the gay Lincoln joke from earlier. The first one was funny. could have done without the second. But as much as they biffed the ending, nothing can take away that Mad Men opening from them. You might call that good advertising. Dry Hard is one of the most disappointing segments on this list, as doing a Hunger Games parody set them up for a lot of killings and gore and stuff. And for what it's worth, this segment delivers on that aspect. It gleefully kills off so many of the kids, giving each of them a horrifying pun on the way out. You could say, if The Simpsons wanted to, they could have just gone for the full Battle Royale parody. But the Hunger Games at least gives them better access to all of Springfield. I probably could have done without Homish though. I wince every time he introduces himself. The main problem I have with the Hunger Games angle is that they don't commit to it. Halfway through, they get bored and switch over to Mad Max Fury Road. Why the sudden parody switch? They don't even do anything interesting with it, just storming the reservoir because of reasons. And then the whole thing is over. And then it's over. It's over. This ending is weird. In the end, we get a half-baked Hunger Games and a barely there Mad Max, with both leaving the audience feeling empty. I have no idea if this ranking is too mean or too nice. I've heard of people who hate this Avatar parody, and others who aren't bothered by it at all. On the plus side, I do like its creativity. Living up to its source material, it features some beautiful scenery and creative creature designs, especially for the final battle. Doing this story with the Rigelians is clever too, fitting the story to the Simpsons Treehouse universe. But from a scene-to-scene level, I find myself incredibly bored by the character interactions and dialogue. Tress MacNeille is doing her usual crusty alien voice, they're hitting the usual Futurama gross-out bag of tricks. There's no sense of chemistry between Bart and Kamala. Then Kang and Kodos show up merely to provide a couple exposition dumps. They somehow manage to make these two boring to listen to, a truly impressive feat. The jokes are nothing to write home about, some clunky USB adapter gags, and typical Avatar plot commentary that came about 2 years too late. I don't think In the Na'vi is a disaster or anything. I can easily imagine a universe where this segment is topping this list. But let's just say I'm not clamoring for The Simpsons to tackle any of the sequels. I would like to take a moment to apologize to all the viewers across the pond for having to listen to The Simpsons' British accents. We will not apologize for the cuisine jokes though. Seriously, 4 Beheadings and a Funeral feels more like a generic anthology story than a Treehouse segment proper. Sure, they link up this Sherlock Holmes parody with Jack the Ripper, they get a bunch of murders in here, but the main thrust of the action is Bart and Lisa's investigations, questioning people and hanging out in opium dens, like in all Sherlock Holmes stories. Or doing annoying jokes about enchanted footstools, like in all Sherlock Holmes stories. Since they have very little time, we get a red herring and a solution that are both shallow and uninteresting. Most of the fun is seeing the seedy underbelly of London in the 1890s. I wish there was a stronger sense of adventure and danger to this, to take advantage of the atmosphere. Also, it ends with it all being a dream, which is total bollocks. Then again, a lot of Sherlock Holmes stories also end with some kind of inexplicable ass pull that we couldn't have known about, so maybe this ending is appropriate after all. Finally, a Fantastic Voyage parody that shows basically none of the human body. Way to play to the strengths of the source material, guys. Seriously, if this were a story about the Simpsons rescuing Maggie from an underwater cave, most of it would barely even change. They go in, they get the ship stuck on his heart, they rescue Maggie, and then they leave. They make jokes about boogers and white blood cells, but we see very little of Burns' feeble body. When Futurama did it, they're going all over the place, doing sperm jokes and whatnot. It's almost like the Simpsons take is too businesslike, that this is an ultra-realistic rescue mission and doesn't want to take fun detours. Why don't you want to take fun detours? Homer's only personality here is to be as stupid as humanly possible and then get left behind because Frank is inexplicably a terrible planner. I do enjoy the body horror of this ending. The way he presses against Burns' skin grosses me out so much. And the song, while super cheesy, is funny in a what the hell way. I do appreciate that The Simpsons wanted to do a different spin than Futurama. By doing a Fantastic Voyage parody that misses the point so much, I appreciate Parasite's Lost even more now. I have no idea what is going on in this segment. It's a parody of the original Godzilla, complete with Japanese dubbing jokes, that turns into a pastiche of Hollywood remake culture, which then wakes up the real Godzilla. What is even happening anymore? The base Godzilla parody is okay, I suppose. It's not the most amazing Simpsons homage in the world, but there is some semblance of style. And it's fun seeing our favorite characters cast in such a dramatically different situation, even if I side-eye the execution sometimes. But as we'll soon discover, they're not interested in playing this thing straight, doing another King Homer-esque segment. I do admire that they wanted to try something different here, make fun of Godzilla 2000 and stuff, but as a Halloween segment, this pivot feels incredibly misguided. It's like one of those fake-out it's all a dream endings, but extended for like 2 or 3 minutes. It's one of the most disjointed and incoherent segments ever, which is really saying something considering some of the crap they've pulled over the years. I love it when a show tries to get cute, subverting our expectations and thinking outside the box, but there's such a thing as too cute. And with Homerzilla, they outsmarted themselves. Telepaths of Glory is a uniquely frustrating Treehouse segment in that it starts out so good, but totally drops the ball in the second half. The beginning, with all the handheld camera action, is so visually interesting, setting up this Chronicle parody that feels authentic and stylish. They get some great jokes out of Lisa and Milhouse trying out their telekinetic powers and making fun of Bart's failures. But there's no sense of escalation. It's just a few random shenanigans until suddenly Milhouse has lost his mind and is going on a rampage. And it's not even that great of a rampage. They lackadaisically wander from joke to joke until thankfully Maggie puts the scene out of its misery. It's a pretty big wet fart of an ending. We're completely robbed of the big telekinetic battle. There's no sense of conflict between Lisa and Milhouse. If you're gonna give our main characters superpowers, find creative things to show them off. Telepaths of Glory somehow manages to make the down-to-earth part compelling and the supernatural part boring. And you know what? I blame Milhouse. I still don't know how to feel about this one. I like the concept. You don't see many parodies of the Golem on TV, but the execution of the story leaves so much to be desired. It doesn't feel like much actually happens in this segment. They kinda sort of do the monster movie angle, where the Golem wreaks havoc in Springfield Elementary under Bart's command. But there isn't a ton of that, it's just a couple moments. None of them feel especially creative or visually interesting either. Otherwise, it's mostly a bunch of hanging out at the Simpsons house discussing his wants and needs. Geez, Lisa, way to turn our fun monster movie into another one of your ethical dilemmas. You would think, with Homer and Bart giving him orders, that there would be more shenanigans, but they play this one surprisingly down to earth. Actually, I guess that's appropriate. Then they close it out with the old Monster in Love gimmick, a certified Treehouse of Horror classic. Except this time they're Jewish. But at least Fran Drescher is here, everybody loves Fran Drescher. I think when you have a super wacky and violent Treehouse segment, doing a cheesy ending can balance things out. Here, it's the dull ending that this dull adventure has earned. Yes, LOL Twilight, The Simpsons took their stab at these books and movies. But, to their credit, this isn't the weirdest adaptation for them to tackle. Lisa is definitely way too young for this parody proper, but it does fit in with her revolving door of boyfriends from over the years. Yeah, I could see Lisa falling for this guy, despite his aggressively punchable face. I don't even think the Twilight pastiche is especially obnoxious here. It's not like they went for the sparkly vampire thing like everybody else. Milhouse transforming into the poodle is probably the worst offender in this regard. I'm just glad they cut that scene where he imprints on a baby. Anyway, in my opinion, this thing falls apart because Homer hijacks it and doesn't let it go. The dinner scene is pretty funny, how the Simpsons pivot this thing to their embarrassing dads, but I don't really want to go through generic vampire jokes with these two. Sesame Street jokes be damned. The pacing of the climax is all over the place, this back and forth of what the characters really want and who is actually in danger. Just bite someone already. Oh god, the Millhouse Poodle is back again. I'll credit the writers for showing some restraint on their Twilight parody and thinking of a unique spin on the concept. Unfortunately, the dads of Twilight was not what I was looking for here. War and Pieces is 5.5 minutes of board game jokes. That's it. There's not much more to be said about it. The writer's room got together, pitched a bunch of board game gags to put characters in danger, and Bart and Milhouse wander aimlessly between them. Also, I guess this is a Jumanji parody? To its credit, the jokes aren't awful. Obviously, when you get this many disparate parodies, some of these are going to land pretty well. My favorite is probably this one. But some of the observations feel like the stuff kids have been joking about forever. It's a premise that is asking the writers to somehow come up with fresh jokes about Battleship and Chutes and Ladders. Pretty tall order. I like how this segment is so aimless, they're forced to hang their climax on a high-stakes game of Mousetrap. Come on guys, I like board games, I like Treehouse of Horror, but there's no substance here. It's just a bunch of jokes thrown in an old Monopoly box. I know I might get some heat for this pick. I've heard from people who absolutely loved The Simpsons' take on Harry Potter. I mean, there are some excellent jokes, particularly in the first half. Love this crime against nature, he is the real MVP. Unfortunately, this is one of the rare instances where the writers jumped on a pop culture phenomenon too early. This came out before the first Harry Potter movie, so it leans more into generic wizard school than anything resembling the style or atmosphere of the source material. This thing is so generic, they had to put Harry Potter in the classroom just so the parody reads. It's adapted into a typical Bart and Lisa school rivalry that doesn't show off their wizarding powers all that much. Just a couple minor spells here or there. The name Lord Montymort gets on my nerves more than I want to admit, and the less said about his enchanted shin, the better. J.K. Rowling is probably rolling over in her grave right now. I don't know. I wonder what this would have looked like if they had made it a year or two later, especially since the series did end up doing that Angelica Button content. As is, Wiz Kids just exists like one of Bart's ill-conceived magic spells. It's half-formed, awkward, and barely resembling the assignment. I might be biased with this ranking since I really enjoy Stranger Things as a whole, but I thought the Simpsons version was incredibly confused and weak. We all laugh about how Stranger Things is such an 80s nostalgia monster, and it feels like the Simpsons got really hung up on that angle. Lots of winking to the audience about Stranger Things' winking to the audience. This Kirk and Luann scene is especially tiresome in this regard. I kinda wish they just wrote Kirk completely out of this segment. They're trying to fit in so many references and plot points that no moment ever gets its time to breathe. Here's Wiggum as Hopper, here's the arcade scene, here's the deprivation tank, here's the upside down. Oh, it turns out Lisa always had psychic powers. Why not? And then the whole thing just kinda ends with everyone stuck in the upside down, the very stale Simpsons subversion of the monster universe being better than our own. I think Danger Things is saved somewhat by some of its jokes, love this wheel spinning thing, but otherwise, this one is too scattershot and shallow to be interesting. There's a small part of me that wishes it could have gotten the not it treatment and gotten a full episode's runtime to work with. Then again, asking for 15 more minutes of this might be looking for trouble. Alright, we gotta talk about how boring Mastering Cadaver is. This is the one Halloween segment I always forget even exists, because it is such a nothing burger. It's frustrating because its source material does set it up to be this psychological thriller testing Homer and Marge's marriage. It's the perfect opportunity to do a suspenseful bottle episode for Halloween. But there is absolutely no sense of tension between Homer, Marge, and Hugh Laurie's character. No chemistry, no drama, no sense of romance. The whole thing is incredibly limp. The plot feels stupid and arbitrary, since they gotta fit in so many twists in such a short runtime. Lots of lengthy explanations, justifying past actions, contradicting previous plot points. Maybe they could get away with it if it were played more farcically, this comedy of errors. As is, they have a send-up of a thriller that is neither thrilling nor sending up any laughs. You can tell the lack of confidence they had in it, since they go for a "it was all Maggie's fantasy" ending, and then an out-of-place Clockwork Orange reference. The segment doesn't do anything aggressively badly. It's not like there are any huge stinkers in the jokes department. It's just incredibly bland, which is one of the worst things a Treehouse segment can be. Back to forgetting this thing even exists again. Trees are not scary. They are not that funny either. How did this make it out of the pitch meeting? This is the equivalent of a Treehouse of Horror Mad Lib. Blank comes to life and kills everyone in town. We've seen so many of these by now, and picking trees as the magical object is not going to give it the creative spark it needs. I do kind of like the idea of Bart's literal Treehouse of Horror being the central object. His dialogue does evoke some of that Grand Pumpkin charm. But other than that, this is just one giant list joke. You can almost hear them in the writer's room pitching one after another. The Giving Tree, Stanford, Tree Rollins. Look, Audrey too is a transplant. Boo, boo, I'm booing you. This one probably should have gone higher, but at the very least, it knows what it is. It's brain dead, it's hacky, but it knows what it's going for and does it. In fact, there's an argument that this concept is so bad it's good, so it gets some ironic points. I say, next time we pick something to come alive and murder Springfield, let's pick something better than trees. You know when this thing is called Untitled Robot Parody, you're probably in for a bad time. I'll admit it, I've never been a Transformers guy, neither the classic stuff nor the Michael Bay monstrosities. It doesn't seem like the Simpsons writers were either, given how joyless this whole thing feels. I like some of the jokes around the house, but the robot battle lacks any sense of action or comedy. I don't think it's a great fit for a Treehouse of Horror in general, partially because the source material isn't Halloween-y, but partially because of the nature of the battle. Say what you want about the killer trees, but at least they're going around murdering our favorite characters. Here, the parody necessitates that these robots are fighting each other instead, so the Simpsons characters are spectators alongside the audience. We're all just watching. They get some jokes out of that angle, but it's not enough to carry the back half. The ending is kind of fun with Marge getting both sides to turn on us, but even then, these kinds of endings are a dime a dozen for the Simpsons by now. I'd be really curious to hear whether the big Transformers fans actually love this one, and maybe this ranking is just me not caring. The Simpsons somehow managed to make battle robots boring, and I'm not sure whether I should be impressed or terrified. Oh god, this one is so brutal. I can't believe something that only aired last year made it all the way to the number 2 spot. I find this thing to be so creatively bankrupt, taking this legitimately great drama and agonizingly trying to fit it into a Halloween format. While there are a couple decent jokes in the first half, there isn't any Simpsons spin on it. There's no value added. All the best moments in this are basically the best moments in Parasite. It's not even artfully done. There's no homage to the amazing staircase sequence, no nothing. Then in the second half, they just end up vomiting out the allegory all over the audience and pile up the bodies. You know, that's what everybody loves about parodies. Long-winded meta discussions about the main metaphor. It feels like the show is bludgeoning us with a giant rock. I get what they're going for with the big battle, the point that they're making, but it's so over the top and it doesn't even make any sense. Why is Mr. Burns here now? Why is he the final boss? Boy, I can't wait for their Halloween parody of Coda next year that ends in a 100-person bloodbath. This segment is such a mess, it actually makes me question for a split second whether Parasite was that great after all. I love you season 33, but it was hard to get the stench off of this one. I'm not sure which aspect is worse, that the Simpsons thought the diving bell and the butterfly was good Halloween fodder, or that filling the thing with fart jokes was the clever spin they needed. To be fair, I suppose they do show off the terror of locked-in syndrome, showing this action from Homer's POV like in the film. It's not especially spooky, but with the right story, maybe you could get some psychological horror out of it. Instead, it's all fart jokes. Okay, I'm not above fart jokes, it will always be an inherently funny bodily noise, but my god are there limits. You can't carry the entire back half of the segment with farts alone. It gets incredibly tiresome quickly. Like with the Killer Trees segment, it almost loops back around to being genius. It is such an aggressively idiotic idea. However, at the risk of being unpopular, I will say that the Spider-Man ending does get a laugh out of me every single time. It is just that ridiculous and stupid. Pretty confident all that farting broke my brain. I don't think this was an especially controversial number one pick. I get the impression that the Homer farting segment is pretty divisive, to put it mildly. But I'm curious where everyone else lands on these terrible Treehouse segments. Were there some stinkers that I skipped over? Are you a big fan of any of these? Somewhere there's gotta be someone who remembers Mastering Cadaver even exists. Let me know in the comments. I ended up debating back and forth on a lot of these. Like, I don't enjoy sitting through the Sideshow Bob segment or Homer eating himself, but at least those are creepy and gross. I'll take that over tedious blandness any day of the week. Hope everyone has a spooky and safe Halloween. Thanks for watching.